we are finishing up our talk on pitching strategy here, which is topic 12. So what I want to do today is look over some different things with batting averages and then getting into when we should throw what pitches and why. And then we'll finish up here with looking at things like heat maps and kind of adding the human element into our discussion. So first off, I have this chart here, which we've seen something similar to this in class, but wanted to kind of elaborate on this now. This takes into account batting averages based on count for MLB teams from 4 different years. So this is over the years really 2000 to 2009. What we can take away from this is a few things. If you notice, the higher up you get in balls without strikes, the higher the batting average goes. Pretty self-explanatory there. When you get to, say, a 3-1 count, that's historically going to be one of the most favorable hitters' counts. But if you look statistically, it's about on par with 2-0. Anytime you start adding strikes in, you see the batting average drops off pretty dramatically, especially when you get to 2 strikes. Essentially, a pitcher has all the advantage regardless of how many balls there are as long as there's 2 strikes. Now, in general, you may hear many pitching coaches talking about getting ahead in the count, throwing a first pitch strike. And while that is good, I mean, you always do want to be throwing strikes, statistically speaking, a first pitch strike doesn't help you out all that much. Let's take a look at some of these here. An 0-0 count, hitting in, let's say, around 340. A 1-0 count, you're hitting about the same. There's really no statistically significant differences between an 0-0 count and a 1-0 count. You look at an 0-1 count, and yes, while there is a statistically significant drop in batting average for the most part, it really isn't all that big of a swing here. So the differences between 0-0 and 1-0 or 0-0 and 0-1 really aren't that considerable when you think of all the emphasis that's put on throwing a first pitch strike. And what I would opine is that a first pitch strike sets you up better mentally to continue your at bat rather than going behind with a first pitch ball where you have to come back and then start to throw additional strikes. What is the most important is your first 3 pitches. Your first 3 pitches in an at bat are the most important. If you look at what the difference is between a 2-1 count and a 1-2 count, this is where it makes all the difference. 2-1, hitters are hitting about 340. 1-2, they're hitting about 170. So if you have a 1-1 count, that is going to be your most critical count to throw a strike. Because if you throw a strike there, you essentially have the batter's batting average. If you throw a ball, you put the batter firmly in control here. Now, as we'll see in a minute here, the different pitches that we have on different counts are going to account for what we do to approach each of these counts here. You also want to take into account what the actual hitter characteristics are, which we'll talk about later when we get into the heat mapping of this. In terms of pitching statistics, again, the first 3 pitches are what matters most. The one individual count that matters most is 1-1. So the 1-1 count is most important because it's impeccable to throw a strike to get to 1-2. What this comes out to is that assuming that a pitcher is able to throw any pitch for a strike, a pitcher needs to be throwing about every 2 out of 3 pitches, or about 67% of all of their pitches for strikes, to be considered an effective pitcher. When you start throwing lower than that number, especially when you get lower than 60% strikes, where every 3 out of 5 pitches is a strike or less, then that's when you see a big jump up in ERA or earned run average, and also WHIP or walks and hits per innings pitched. Obviously, the higher those numbers go, the worse off your pitcher is. Now, how we decide on a pitch? Well, this is data compiled from really hundreds of thousands of pitches in Major League Baseball over the span of about, I believe, 2 years. And what this is all saying is what pitch type here, so which type of pitch gives me what kind of result. So just to quickly go over what these mean here, the type, that's what the actual pitch is. The number, that's going to be how many were thrown. MPH, miles per hour, the average speed of the pitch. The swing rate here is how many times the pitch was swung at. So percentage-wise, pitch is divided by swings. Or I'm sorry, swings divided by pitches, I should say. Whiff means how many times the pitch was swung at and missed while it was in the strike zone. Foul means a foul ball. B to CS was ball to called strike ratio. The chase percentage here is going to be how many times or what percentage of pitches you swung at outside of the strike zone. The IWZ here is going to be your called strikes from a wide zone. The watch percentage, how many times you watched a called strike. The NKSLG is your non-strikeout slugging percentage. So just as we had BABIP, which is batting average on balls in play, or your non-strikeout batting average, the NK slugging is your non-strikeout slugging percentage. GB, ground balls, LD, line drives, FB are going to be fly balls, PU, pop-ups, and then home run to fly out or fly ball percentage. The different pitches we want to focus on right now are going to be CH, CU, FA, and SL. So those are primarily the ones we're going to look at here. The fastball, changeup, curveball, and slider. If you look, obviously the fastball is your fastest pitch here. Changeup is going to be considerably slower, as we discussed earlier. The changeup is going to be about 7 to 10 miles an hour slower than your fastball, but it should look similar to a fastball, which is why the whiff rate for a changeup is higher than a fastball. Your curveball here is going to have a similar whiff rate to your changeup, and then your slider here is going to be a lot faster typically, so it's much faster than the curveball, and it's going to have a much higher swing percentage. Now, what does all this mean? Well, this just gives you the numbers for what's happening when you throw a pitch. Your fastball is going to be the pitch that essentially dictates what the batter's perceptions are of the pitches he's seeing. Every other pitch you throw, aside from, as you see here with a two-seam fastball or a sinker, is going to be significantly slower than your four-seam fastball. So the bigger the gap you have in pitch velocity, typically the better your percentages are with getting a higher whiff rate. The closer your speed is together of your different pitches, the easier it is to hone in on that, because you are eliminating at least one of the different factors you have from changing pitches. When you change a pitch, or when you throw a different pitch, you do it for primarily 3 reasons. The first reason is to change speed. The second reason is to change location, and location can be up, down, in, or out. And then the third speed, or the third reason, is primarily to change your pattern. So you don't want to get into a pattern of throwing the same pitch over and over again, even if you're throwing it in different locations. So if you throw an off-speed pitch at approximately the same speed, it's much easier for a hitter to hone in on that because they don't have to change much of their approach. What's best is if you have essentially very distinct speeds for each of your pitches. Then you can force a batter to focus on not only the pitch selection, but the movement as well as the speed itself.